What's up, everybody? You're now tuned in live to Super Heru Radio. I'm your host, Aseer the Gutierrez, along with my co-host, Selena, Empress of 10,000 Years, Saga, Assad, you, Amor, the human families of the planet Earth. We want to say definitely love and light, peace to you, and thank you for, again, tuning in and coming in and checking us, how we do every moon, day, night. Hope all has been as well as it can be under the present climate of instability throughout the world. However, we are all here to support each other, and we're all here to let each other know that the end is not yet, that there is still something called hope that exists for those people who know that it does, and it is real. It's just as real as hate and envy and jealousy and all of the bullshit that we be having to deal with every day from our own people as well as other people. And it's more inclined for you to be righteous and just in your actions more so than it is about being right. You know what I'm saying? So we definitely want to give thanks and praise to everyone who's been doing their thing and striving to be out there and live life as good as they can. So as we always do, we always start with the current events. And there have been a bunch of events that have been going on kind of on the low that I don't know if anybody's been really paying attention to. One of the biggest ones was your man skirting into Afghanistan on the low to set some things in motion and then really bounce out the country just as fast as he got in there. A lot of people were very surprised that he went out there basically to deal with Karzai, who was the president of Afghanistan, who was also at one time president of Halliburton, who was also president at one time of Standard Oil, who was also the president at one time of BP. So as you can see, everybody's playing the same shell game. But long story short, the real G, or at least what I've divined from the situation, is that he basically is about to flip it on you guys and tell you guys that they're about to shut down the Afghanistan war too. Now, usually it would be great when they come out and talk about how, you know, these wars are being shut down and they're stopping the fighting. But they're only really shutting down the Afghan section of the plan because they basically got the concessions that they want to be able to shuttle this pipeline through Pakistan. So don't be surprised within the next couple of days you see something major go down with Pakistan while they're basically striving to get up in there. Because the protocol to set up the pipeline that's been traveling, again, to the new American states in the quote-unquote Middle East, they're moving at such a speed that they're kind of ahead of schedule. So certain countries are being prepped for whatever invasional devices or things that they want to do to kind of throw everybody off of what's really going on. And like I said, what's really going on is that everything that is running through these people is running through Afghanistan now because they're about to make their grand push towards open conflict with China and Russia, specifically China first. Their antagonistic view, or the antagonistic view that they've been attributing towards their relationships with the Russia, has now reached almost like a crescendo, because now that Putin is back up in there, everything is starting to get switched up, because Putin, unlike a lot of his successors, wasn't down with certain shit. He's not the bootlegger that Medvedev is or was, who is the outgoing president or premier of Russian politics. So this guy's about to set things in motion. So as these things start to set in motion, they want to be able to start to hedge their bets and start to prepare and prep everybody for the next phase of the conflict. So the next phase of the conflict, like I said, is to inject themselves into the interior, not only of Africa, through Africa, but specifically by establishing this pipeline that they basically can run straight through Afghanistan, down into Pakistan, down into Iraq. So in this way, this gives them the first leg of their strategy, which is basically to create an annexed version of the United States in the Middle East. So within a couple of years, don't be surprised that people from Iraq all of a sudden start to promote things like petition of statehood, because the United States, as it claims itself now, has basically now past the receivership model. Now it's going into the full phase reorganization. So in any reorganization, just like Reconstruction and everything else that has happened, one has to look at one's own self politically to find out exactly what within the new political strata position they're going to occupy. Now, again, the issues with all of these things that we're saying is the fact that in the very end, it's coming down to who has some sort of semblance of civility or nationality, right? But your nationality does not solely rest on whatever declaration you make, people. Declaring the nationality is not enough, because everything that was done in terms of the United States on an international level, or anything that is done on an international level, is not done by proclamation or declaration. Those are two of the standard operative vehicles that you use to be able to substantiate yourself as an individualized nation in the planet. However, that is not the standard bearer to denote one's international character, especially when one does not necessarily have a fully functioning operative form of government. And unfortunately, we as indigenous people, the true indigenous people, do not. We have semblances of them. We have certain movements that are more cohesive at the outset, or at the inception than others, but none are really that much far away from any of the other ones, man. And I'm going to keep it real. And I'm not a member of any groups so really I'm kind of speaking blind on that, but I really feel like if it was like that, then we would know. If there was a group of individual Moors or a group of individual Moors that was making all these moves or whatever and popping shit off, hooking niggas up, and providing a consulary or console for the people to get banged out or bailed out or whatever, we would all know about it. So since I've never heard of that, functioning in this perspective and under the present auspices of what it is, then I must understand that that's not the case. So even though we may be striving to do this, we have to be honest as about where we are. And one thing that I see lacking sometimes in a lot of different situations, groups, what so have you, is the fact that a lot of people don't want to keep it real, man. They don't want to tell you that they may not know how to do something, because then they feel that you'll go to this one and get it from him, because that's the nature of anybody searching for something. If you do not have what I'm searching for, then it's my obligation as a searcher to keep looking. So, like I said, because a lot of these people have not had the functional reasoning to continue along certain paths of issue, they now put themselves or find themselves at odds. And they don't have a viable means of fully expressing their nationhood because, again, our nation as it is established has been fractured. And instead of the voices that are there to, let's say, hey, let's bring it together, the more we are being urged basically to not. So all I'm saying is, like, let's be real with the fact that what this says to the outside world is that, one, we are now organized, and two, we do not trust each other. I'll be the first to say it, that I don't trust a lot of people in this cipher. And the thing is, we got into this conscious community to feel like we could trust people. So what does that say about us? It says that we haven't, in a sense, graduated to the point that we have put aside a lot of the false airs as to how we run a society or the government or whatever. So until we do, we're pretty much going to be in this position. You know what I mean? And we should be honest. Thanks. And we should be honest with the fact that this is where we are. Because once we're honest with the fact that we are in this position, then maybe we can come up with practical responses and practical ways out of it. But if we all fronting like each one of us is the one that got the handle on how to make things happen or to do it, then we are not really going to get anywhere, because everybody is basically trying to save face from everybody else. That's why everybody else got a different formula and a different, agenda when it comes to this thing. But what we have to, again, understand is that, and remember, you heard it here first, between the years of 1983 and 1998, there was a huge influx of patriot information into the general aspect of moral science or the moral science movement. And that information is where a lot of that UCC shit came from. prior to that, the whole free white people thing and all of that wasn't really wasn't clicking like that amongst those of us who were in a sense studying whatever. But once the commerce aspect of UCC came out, then it became a big thing. Now, speaking as one of the first people to ever follow UCC document successfully in New York, I can tell you that it was a very arduous process, at least for us, because, again, we was doing it where nobody was doing it. None of these groups that's out here now telling you how they can flip liens and none of these groups existed when we was doing this, you understand? So a lot of the information and stuff that they putting out there, like that should sound cool, but it sound cool if you don't know no better, or it sound cool if you don't know where a lot of that origin of a lot of that information came from. And so I'm saying all of that to say that there is nothing new under the sun per se. It's just that they repackaging things in a different way. However, the problem, again, as it always is a problem, is the fact that there isn't a cohesive base. You understand? It's not a cohesive base. One of the main aspects of declaration, you got to understand there are protocols when it comes to the international acceptance and going back into the family of nations, which you don't really hear a lot of Moors or those indigenous people talk about in the concept of law. And that's because most Moors identify with a foreign Moorish character instead of an indigenous Moorish character. You are of African nativity, original man, original woman of America, North Central South America, but you are not of African descent. You understand? You are of, quote-unquote, Afro-Moroccan or Morican, you see what I'm saying, nativity with African descent, you know, but you do not have African descent, because if that was the case, then you would move and operate the way an African does. You understand? You don't. The Africans will be the first one to tell you, you are not African. You know what I mean? They'll be the first one to come and tell you some shit like that, as if that's bad, like that's a bad thing not to be them. When really, they are suffering from amnesia as well. They don't even really realize that really their continent was under our jurisdiction. How about that? Everybody wanted, if I asked you, I said this in a class sometimes, like if I was to ask the average so-called black metaphysician or scholar what was their greatest king in Africa, they could tell me a bunch of different people. But if I was to ask you what was your favorite king or queen that's born here in America, they couldn't tell me nothing. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason why they don't want you to mess with that. Because, again, a lot of the stuff that you got is already put out here in terms of merit. So when we do the knowledge to shit, if we are really speaking about law, and this is coming from somebody with a PhD in jurisprudence, if we are then speaking of maxims of law, then we are speaking of things that actually cannot be changed, because that's the true definition of a law in a positive sense. The law definitely then is something that cannot be changed, like the law of averages, the law of gravity, the law of physics. See? These are things that, in a sense, go through fluctuations, but essentially stay the same. Like the law of rain is when you go out in the rain, you get wet, even with an umbrella. So there's no way around certain things is the moral of the story, you understand? But nothing that you understand or I understand gets done in this world through declaration. Name one nation that has fully declared itself openly, besides the United States, has declared itself openly and then has been openly respected like that. How many years the Palestinians been petitioning to be seen as a quote-unquote state? But their problem is they going to the wrong people for that. You don't go to the United Nations for that. United Nations is set up for bankrupt nations. You go to The Hague if you want to do something like that and be spoken of and actually heard. But do you know that there is an entire whole Masonic section of the Grand Hague International Court? That there's a whole nother section that you go in and it's only for jurisdictional Masons, Freemasons. Understand? That Mason who blew up them people in Norway a little while ago, and he had the Mason apron and all that on, that white guy, he was a part of that. He worked there. And I mean, these people walk around with their aprons and all that open. You understand? Because that's the International Masonic World Court. You understand? So all it is I'm saying is that one aspect of declaring something does not make it so. This is why a lot of times Moors, you'll declare things and put paperwork in, and all that's good, but then when it comes to the enforcement of that paperwork, you can't do it because the state is keeping you locked up in a state jurisdiction by having to show and prove shit to them and keep going back to their limited jurisdiction when really that's not what you're supposed to be dealing with. If it was really set up right, you would have your own consulary or consul that could be contacted in the event that something happened to you, and then they basically would call the police or whatever. The police would then call them, and then they would come down and basically get you up out of there. The same way if you was a Seminole or Lakota or whatever, you was walking down the street or whatever, and you got into it with a pig or something, the pig cannot arrest you because you are not a state citizen. You are, in a sense, under federal jurisdiction. So what that means is that they would have to call the BIA or somebody else to come down, and then they would vouch for you, and then they would have to call a tribal elder or leader, and then they would have to come and basically transfer you or hand you over to them. Therefore, that means that declaration is not the full thing. Proclamation is not the full thing. Because whatever you declare, whatever you proclaim, still has to be validated. Who's validating what it is that you're claiming? You understand? Everybody that's, in a sense, validating what you have as an indigenous individual, if you really do the knowledge, is dead. Nobuju Ali, CM Bay, right? These people are physically dead. So when you say that this is a modicum of your nation, how the white man is hearing that is that you worshiping a bunch of dead people. You understand? Because he know that most of these temples out here function under the herds thing, and because the herds treaty was done in such a way that they don't really have they can't really speak out against the government. They can't really do certain things because they function almost the way a 501c3 does. And that was done through legal maneuvering and trickery like everything else, but it still was done. And it still has yet to be rectified by members of those temples. So, God forbid, you get involved with some shit and you try to follow your local Moorish temple. If you're not a card-carrying member or you don't subscribe to the religion of Islamism, then they won't vouch for you. But guess what? Let a Hasidic Jew get involved in some shit in a community of Jews that may not be of his same denomination. So long as they're not Sekmars or Lubavitch, because those are the ones that really hate each other. Those are the warring factions of Judaism right now. They look out for each other. You know what I'm saying? Same thing with the La Raza. They do the same thing. You know what I mean? When it comes to them, they refer to themselves as the race. You understand? And one of the initiative practices that they first started with members of the Mexican Mafia was initiation by coming up by killing black men and black women, just shooting them, right? So, again, how did that come about in terms of the Mexican mob and doing that? How did they do that? They did that through the thing that makes everything else work in a society, or everything that is done in society in terms of dealing with people and any national character. Nothing has been done successfully from the perspective of a declaration or a proclamation. You could declare and proclaim what you want. That's not the issue. The issue is the enforcement of that proclamation and what it is you are actually proclaiming and to whom you are doing so, and who or whom is a part of the thing that you are declaring. The only way that can be verified is with another international document that you're going to hear a lot of Moors talk about, and that is a treaty of peace and friendship to the world. You can't declare nothing if you ain't got no treaty of peace and friendship, because even if you declare something, that's still keeping you on a certain level. But if you create a treaty with a bunch of like-minded individuals who are subscribing to the same sort of ideology that you are, then they are agreeing to hold you down the same way the 13 so-called founding fathers adopted the so-called Constitution that allowed them to become a government. They all recognize each other, which means that the Declaration of Independence is actually a treaty between two different governments. You understand? Think about that. That U.S. Constitution is actually like a receipt of really three different governments, because it's actually broken up into three sections. The preamble to the 7th article deals, or in a sense could deal with us. From the 7th article to the 13th deals with the denizens, meaning those Moors who came over here or at the behest of George and paid us rent. And then the last stage is for the aliens, from the 14th Amendment on to the Supremacy Clause. That's all about the aliens, which is why they also made clear delineation between slavery and African slavery. Slavery represents the enslavement of Caucasian people. Whereas African slavery represented the kidnapping of the African POWs that were falling victim to the wars that we were all going through on both sides of the hemisphere. Going to bed? Oh. It is on this. So this is how it's been happening. You see what I'm saying? Everything that the United States or any other country or government in this world, going back to one of the very first treaties that was drawn up between the members of the Meniad dynasties in ancient Kemet and the Meniad dynasties in ancient Kemet and the Narmers, or what they refer to as the Narmor or the Noir Moors. In a sense, the treaty that solidified the unification of Lower and Upper Egypt, okay, or Lower and Upper Kemet. So going from that treaty all the way up to what? The Treaty of Peace and Friendship of Morocco in that 1786, depending on which one you read. There's the one in 1786 that calls you a Moor, and there's the one in 1787 that refers to you as a Muslim. But then some people have a version who put it out that says the reverse, that the first one actually said Muslim, and the second one actually said Moor, to get away from your true, in a sense, religion. But whether you was Muslim or not, the United States was not founded as a Christian, is not founded as a Christian nation. That's why it cannot have no crosses and all of that in federal public buildings. Because every nation in this nation is basically a composite nation of a nation that was broken and reestablished itself. Every nation except us. When these people fought the Revolutionary War, revolve means to get back to, like I said before. So that means that when they were revolving, they were basically fighting to get back to the ways of their forefathers. And they did. Ain't they speaking English today? So the treaty that put the United States back under the jurisdiction of Britain, or as to say, transferred the federal United States government from under the jurisdiction of the Republican, a.k.a. original form of government on this hemisphere, got transferred over after the War of 1812 to the Lloyd's Bank of London, in which the United States was incorporated, and then they basically brought that corporation over here by destroying the Universal Apprentice Hall of Science for the Temple of Science and Law and Government, and then burn that down and then reestablish what they now call the White House. When you look at the electoral protocols and where they originally came from, they came from a place called the House of Burgess, or what they used to refer to back in the days as the Burgermeisters or the Burger Moors. These were Moors from Hamburg and Luxembourg and Hessians or whatever who came over here and settled and hooked up and intermarried with, same way the Mali people came over here, hooked up with the Cherokees, the same way these Bergs basically hooked up and they came over here and started hooking up with members of like the Pequot Nation. But then that eventually led to the Pequot War, in which a lot of us who were known as Pequots got absorbed into the other nation due to the Pequot doing an abundance of trading with the colonists, which at the time was under strict regulation due to the fact that they didn't want them to penetrate the interior of the country, which is why, again, they were always regaled to the coasts. if you look at any occupying force initially, especially even in South Africa, they follow the same tactics. That's why with the current wars in Africa that they're fomenting, one being the war in Eritrea right now, two being the war in Nigeria, three being the separation of North and South Sudan, four being the ongoing psychological operations that have been going on in Uganda since the assassination of Patrice Lumumba yesterday. These protocols keep going. Why? Because Uganda is almost like the pineal gland of Africa to them. That's also where they get what they refer to as the divine rubber that they use to power all the cell phones and all the technology that they're using over here. They're using it based upon a hard carbonite resin that they find in between some of the rocks in places like Kilimanjaro, as well as at the base of it, as well as in Lake Victoria, in and around Lake Victoria. So they keep everybody destabilized, they keep everybody genocided and all that while they keep everything going. So while all the genocide and shit is going, American workers and people's over there still, now they're even going in harder on the rubber and all of that. You understand? Because now they don't have nobody watching them. So they can do what it is they want. Go look at the movie Hotel Rwanda when Don Cheadle's character goes up to Nick Nolte and realizes that the UN and these people is down with the genocide and all that shit. He's like, why don't you help me? And this is somebody that he's been talking to or whatever. And Nick Nolte tells him straight up. He said, the problem with y'all is that you guys aren't even niggers. You're an African. So we really don't give a F about you. You know what I'm saying? He said, you're basically here to die because this whole place is basically going to be up under our jurisdiction a little while. So that was in a movie, again, won Oscars and all that shit. You know what I mean? Where they just straight up telling you. They have no problem telling you in movies how much you ain't nothing. You know what I mean? Every Martin Scorsese film you look at, they killing some nigga or calling somebody a nigga or saying how niggas they don't have no souls or nothing. And what do niggas do? Every chance they get, big up Scarface, big up Goodfellas, big up all this other shit, right? When these are the people who were the descendants of the people who got you out of places like Grenada, Malaga, Sardinia, when them places was over here. So being that Morocco was the first country in the world, or the first kingdom to recognize the United States, that was due to the fact that it already had embassies and consuls and shit over here due to the unification of the Moors in terms of the universal trade routes that went throughout the planet, that we held the understanding on. Like, people don't believe that native people here, black people here, Almex, Washita, whatever, that we were seafaring people as well that had frigates and boats and all of that. Like, think about it. Why would the noble family, the pseudo-noble family of France at a time when they was warring with black people, right, where they allegedly was warring with each other, or France was warring with black people, why would they then send the lost Bouffon, meaning the prince that is actually supposed to sit on the throne in Europa? Why would they send him over here and then marry him off into the noble family of the traditional tunica heirs over here? Why would a noble family marry into a family of quote-unquote savage Indians? Why would they do that? One thing you got to understand about politics is that money marries money. So while we look at it as a black and white thing sometimes it's just a money thing. So as a black man, coming up in the 60s, 70s, or whatever, the white one was seen as a status symbol. Same thing as it is today, you know what I'm saying? But back then it was even more so. So the more pro-black you are, eventually it was a spit in the face. They looked at it or justified it as a spit in the face to the white man and see how they made it in your world with your woman, and I could still have these black babies and make her have my nation. This is how it was justified by people like Eldridge Cleaver and Clarence Thomas and, all the rest of these guys, James L. Jones, all the rest of these guys that do that. But at the bottom of all of that is a insecurity of self from a cultural perspective and a people perspective. And that there's something so wrong with you that you need to identify with something that's totally, in a sense, opposite of you to make it. That has nothing to do with people or our race or our culture. That is everybody's individual choice to be who and what they want to be. But when it comes to those of us who want to be something else, it's maladapted to use information or laws or statutes that apply to a nation that you say you are not a part of. This is how you sound to the cracker. You sound like you're telling him, I'm not a part of your system. I'm not a part of anything you have or whatever, but you have my money, so you're supposed to pay me out. When at the time that you went into the situation where you made him the steward, you gave him explicit instructions not to hand nothing over to anybody that's coming as an individual. Because we didn't individually hand the government over or abandon the government. It was a collective thing where we went into recess, and then while we were in remission or recess to get everything straight, civil war and everything break out all of a sudden, and then all of the reconstructional stuff that happened after that put us farther outside of the political strata of the society that they just flipped in their image based upon our discontent with one another. We can't blame them for that. And so they took what they learned and then created a Freemasonic society based on Luciferianism that they then could rule in secret. Other nations now is on that, going into their governments, finding out who's down with it or whatever, but essentially all of it has the same origin point. So the overall assessment of the situation then says that in order for us to be fully recognized internationally as a body politic, then we have to do it in a manner that is conducive to a national character that was reminiscent of that which we had. So the enemy is looking at it like, well, I'm not going to tell you how to do something you're supposed to already know how to do. So with that being said, we are still almost in a trial and error era of seeing what works and what don't. But we have to be honest with each other to say that that's where we're at and not be so definite and finite and fluid into saying that this is what it's going to be and this is how it's going to work for you, when we know, like I said, individually, that we can only do but so much. But if there was a situation where a treaty was drawn up by those people who decide to file, and then let's say all them people file on the same day, and then all them people got the same treaty and they filing, and then all those people take that filing and then make sure that it's recorded in The Hague as well as the United Nations, as well as with the Attorney General of the United States. Now these people are bound by something international. That means that there has to be a liaison between both of those factions, those people. But to enter into a treaty, one must be autonomous. You see what I'm saying? Just like in order to be according to some of the old maxims of Freemasonic history, like when you read the old Albert Mackey books and the W.M.R. Singleton books, as well as some of the old books by Coyle, like Coyle's Masonic Encyclopedia. They tell you that in order to be recognized as a Freemason, you have to be born free, because the idea is you have to be free, in a sense, unfettered by any legal disability, an oath, so that way you can be free to become part of them and take their oath, in which they become first. So in that, you're not supposed to really have an opinion about anything that goes on in the government or the world or anything else. And whatever the national character or religion of the people is that you're supposed to be, because your true religion really is Masonry. This is why it is used as a tool for nefarious inclinations due to the ability of and the applications of all the secrets. And it's easier to influence people who you might not see in everyday life, but you'll see there. So, in Skull and Bones, you'll have the President of the United States himself come down and be the worshipful master in the induction ritual for whatever candidate. You know what I'm saying? Same thing at Prince Hall or whatever. The person sitting right next to you will be somebody like the president or Eric Holder or somebody like that, and then you be a rapper or whoever else with these people. You know what I'm saying? So the boundaries that are set in society are then flipped and done away with in instances where the brotherhood is convening. This was under such scrutiny in the mid-1800s, between, let's say, 1820 and 1834, that it was actually anti-Masonic party that was created that got Andrew Jackson in office. Andrew Jackson, who was a slave on the run as a black Irishman to the day he became president. So, again, we're saying then that everything that's done to people or by people in an international character is then done by treaty. It is not done by declaration or proclamation. Those are the first steps, just like, let's say, you have the Constitution of the United States. That's the only thing they talk about, but that's only the last part. That's only the last part of the whole equation, which is the other two aspects of it, which were the Articles of Association and the Articles of Confederation. They want you to believe that they just all convened one day and decided that, okay, the Constitution is the document, or was the first document that they said, okay, we want to do it. And if that was the case, then what was the Bill of Rights? See what I'm saying? The Bill of Rights went hand in hand with that due to the fact that they both were connected to another document, again, the elder document called the Articles of Confederation, that when you read it, deals explicitly with the rights of the free inhabitants of the several states in the 48 states, i.e. us. And it prevented the greater general United States under the federal corporate or corpus that was being created. It forbid them to have a navy or an army. That's why George Washington was not army of the colony. The colony army almost had nobody in it. He was the general. He was the captain of, let's say, the colonial army, but then he was the general. He was the captain general, let's say, or general of the colonial army, but then at the same time, he was the general of the continental forces. The continental forces represented all of the different warriors that represented the bands and braves and warriors that consisted of the, again, 48 states that were in the 13 zones that comprised what we refer to as the Monarchan, a.k.a. Moroccan, a.k.a. Mohawken, a.k.a. Mohegan, a.k.a. Moroccan, Moroccan or Washington, or whatever you want to call it, empire. But we don't look at ourselves in an imperial fashion. We look at ourselves as an occupied people, just due to the fact that we've been like that for the past couple of years. You know what I'm saying? So essentially, like I said, we're at the point in history where all of this has now come to bear on our sense as a people who are striving to contain ourselves or be represented by something greater that we can fall back on. The same way that we want that people basically rely on the United States, because it's horrible and as depraved and insane and satanic as it is, do you want to live anywhere else, like right now? You know what I'm saying? And if you could, where? And even if you did, how long would it be before whatever it is here is not over there? So because they always want you to look outside of yourself, you don't actually pay attention to all of the things that was left here for us basically to pick up and use to create a future. So when you look at images of the future and things that are put out there, you are not in it. They don't have no black people in it. And when it is, it's like one or two. So you're still a minority in a time when all of your ancient books and texts are saying that you not only are the physical majority now, you're also the spiritual majority. Which is, again, i.e., why Noble Jar-Lee referred to the Moorish Science Temple as a divine national movement. Not a national movement, not a movement dedicated to getting your money back from the government based upon what they owe you. If it's real like that, then there should be no problem for once you file, you get a basic number or whatever, and then in the mail you should get you a black card that should have unlimited credit on it, and then you just should be able to rock and do your thing. If that's how it really works, because that's how it worked with food stamps, that's how it worked with unemployment. So why wouldn't they make it work like that? Why would you have to go through all of this backdoor shit in which you have to then have your stuff funneled through the main hub at 55 Wall Street, which is the birthplace of everybody in the country or the world's birth certificate. That's his first place of residence. Then they send it to the NASDAQ or the Chamber of Commerce, and then from there it goes down cross-reference through the British clearinghouse for the Queen to get her money through Kentucky, the Kentucky Derby, and then they send that to Lloyd's Bank of London. You know what I'm saying? Where all of that gets reprocessed and then get funneled back to the banks of London that then loan that money back to the banks in here in the United States. But again, most of the banks that went under were all a part of the old Confederate bank ring that was owned by people like Hiram Solomon, Moors, black people, who funded the initial Confederacy. But because we look at the Confederacy from the view of white men who enslaved and hated black people, then it became a situation where people didn't know how to react. So this is what it is when it comes to how people, or why it's so hard for us to branch out and have our own, because we haven't come to grips with, again, what it means to be in our natural character, because nation also means nature, and it also means natural, and also means neta. So that means that for us to fully, or for us to truly be in a, come on, stop, don't do that. For us to truly be in a position where, we can be recognized, we have to create a nation, or to be recognized as our own nation. We have even yet to be in a natural state enough to fully dialogue about what that is. How many times have you been in ciphers or lectures or situations where everybody is there and listening and everybody has a good feeling, whatever, and then when you go home, you try to keep it going, and then you look forward to the next one, which is great. But after a while, you start to see the same things and hear the same things, and eventually it starts to be like, okay, well, where's this going? What are we actually doing with this? Whereas when you look at other societies or people's cultural organizations, they create a space for them to have that. So there's a Mexican cultural society, there's a Greek cultural society, the Ethiopian cultural society. You know what I mean? Why are all the African American society, why are they always funded somehow by some Jewish organization? i.e. meaning that they're not in their natural sense, which means that they're not following their own agenda, which means that they cannot really put forth energy to become a nation or follow nationhood. Because, again, to do that, you got to be in a natural state. Since when have we been in a state that's natural enough for us to be able to talk about stuff other than making money? We can't even decide. We can't even decide how we want, you know what I'm saying, what flag we want to use. So, again, we're talking about these people and all of that, but at the same time, these people are the ones that are still holding the patents on stuff that we are using to represent ourselves now. You know what I'm saying? You don't see people using things for other reasons. Like, you don't see, Russia using the United States flag. You know what I'm saying? You don't see that. So how can we then still use or I'm not saying we shouldn't use it, but I'm saying if we're going to use it, then let's really openly go out and claim it. But we can't do that as individuals because that would mean that we're trying to claim something as an individual fashion as opposed to something greater that has a trust or a national ministry trust that it is now handling its legal affairs through. When the people decided to sue Osama bin Laden and these people, these niggas went right to a Upper East Side law firm run by Jews, bin Laden and them. So when people say that these Muslims hate Jews, that's not true. And vice versa, that's not true. It's the type, man. It's how you rolling with these people or not rolling with them, and it's your national character. And no nation in this planet has ever come up, unfortunately, especially after, let's say, Babylon, without some sort of fight in which the people actually have to take what it is they know that they deserve from the government that they set up. If Kemet was so great and all of that, then how come you ain't in it now? If the old Moorish Empire was so great, how come you ain't in it now? If the old Ethiopian Empire was so great, how come you ain't in it now? If the Black Panthers and all that was so great, how come you're not a Black Panther now? You are culturally, by your studies and the understanding of that movement and what it meant to the world and your people and such and such, but you are not a card-carrying member of that. And even if you are you to the point that you're ready to die? Because that was the old modicum. You know what I'm saying? Which then harkens back to the old Comedian right of Osar, where you actually had to die. They actually had to kill you into the pyramids. You know what I'm saying? And then you had to resurrect yourself and then find your way out. So again, these are some of the unfortunate. Well, it's not, I don't want to say unfortunate, like it's sorrowful, but these are some of the things again that we've been doing in knowledge too, and been seeking to find solutions and dealing with in a fashion where we can actually see some progress. Yet, to fully implement it, it's going to have to be a certain way. And again, when you tell somebody that they God, and you tell somebody that they their own nation or whatever, then they again have the right to do what they want to do. So if they don't want to be down with this in that way, then that's their prerogative. But again, that doesn't help with the overall reconstitution of the government that we allegedly say that is ours, that we know is there with the evidence of the pyramid, but is been altered in the aspect of the capstone being raised above it. But that is also a symbol of how the pyramids themselves were made, in the fact that first the capstone appears, and then the bricks under it, and then so forth and so on, and it goes all the way down. But because we look at everything from a human engineering or arm, leg, arm engineering aspect, we think of ramps and ladders and stuff and building this thing, when we don't think the fact that we could have been on such a high dimensional frequency that we built the thing They make movies where they tell you they do that every day, but it's always them doing it. So you don't think that you have that capability, or your children have that capability. Your children know they got it. My son don't want help with nothing. Nothing, yo. You want to do everything yourself. And it's like, come on, son. You got to still enjoy being a kid. Excuse me, a child. But that's because these crystal children are directly tuned in to the magnetic frequency of this planet and the position and the global positioning by which they are from each other. That's why your child will click with certain children and certain children automatically start hating on. Because their experience is a mirrored experience of what your experience would be like if you were a child now, which does not make them you, but would make them you if you were them now. So when women or men use children as a means of battle, they are trying to manipulate the future of the other person that they had the child with. You understand? It's a form of time manipulation. It's a way to use time as a means to break down the overall love that would have been unimpeded if that time was allowed to exist. However, due to the fact that alternate realities exist where that time was not impeded, then the love that exists is still in this reality as a mirror reflection of the reality in which it continued unaffected. This is where reconciliation and atonement come in. When Farrakhan did his speech on atonement, or the action, really, he was going through the different levels of building a nation. Like, we have to get to the point where we start to forgive each other. You know what I'm saying? Meaning, forgive in law means erasing the debt. So, if we agree to manifest a family trust or whatever based upon what has already been laid out for us to do, all we got to do is do that. But we want to have our cake and eat it too. We want to be able to get it and live right and then help everybody else. Because we have come to understand that in the Western society, there's the master and the apprentice. And when it gets to a point, the apprentice kills the master to become a master and then take on another apprentice who will then kill him to become master and then bring on another apprentice and so forth and so on. That's the way it assists. But like I said, all of those are allegorical stories of the decay and the destruction of the old Moorish Empire. The Sith is red and black. Red and black today are the symbols of anarchy, or the colors of the anarchist movement in modern geopolitical politics, as well as terrorism. So, again, treaty then is a necessary application when one is striving to declare anything to be seen as international. And that treaty then, once established, leads to a console, again, or a trust that has been created that then facilitates the movement of that. Right now, the only liaison that you have as a natural person and to the so-called quasi-federal corporate government is the so-called strawman, which is not necessarily necessary to function, but due to the draconian practices of modern law, you got to know how to flip it until you have something to move yourself into. It's maladapted to come out of a nation to become an expat somewhere, but then have no necessarily nation to go into that is recognized in the world as it stands. The difference between ours and everybody else's would be the fact that ours has already been recognized as the truest original, which means we're like the grandfathers and grandmothers of everybody. But because we haven't stepped up, nobody has stepped up for us. Because all of our luminaries hook up with them to sustain their society for fear of their lives, really. So, like I said, it's a consistent thing that can be rectified fairly quickly if done under the right perspective. And because we still have, you know what I mean, certain people of lineage and status and stature that have already been recognized by members of their own community, we can just implement a thing where, in a sense, I don't want to use the word state, but you have a indigenous society that is comprised of darkly melanated indigenous people and those people who are family to them. Because there are some Moors who are married to Caucasian people. There's some Moors who are, and men and women who still subscribe to that and are truer than some of the ones that's not. You know what I'm saying? But they in their own position, but that don't mean that they don't want to contribute in that way. You just have to, again, it has such a vetting process in the application of how we create an association that once the confederation is set up. No, it's on. Yeah, I'll do it again. So it's become a new phenomenon amongst us now to seek the quick buck, if you will, through individual situations, which allows them to pick us off quicker. Whereas if it was a collective thing, where it has become that in which some of the proclamations that were made or whatever, but again, those things are still in a pseudo-subordinate fashion. I'm talking about something that is strictly grassroots from members of the community who subscribe to the indigenous lifestyle, which is really what the conscious community really is, and the applications of those to create, again, a community in which, you know, this is the predominant way. You know what I mean? Like every Friday, these Jews is walking up and down the neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? Never fail. But we don't really have institutionalized, let's say, rites of passages that are not necessarily affiliated with a religious organization that other people may not subscribe to. But if we take it out of the context of that individual's so-called spiritual practice and apply it to the overall indigenous spiritual practice, the Great Spirit, which is the law of Gai Nashqua, which is the law of Ma'at, which is the Keper Nagas, which is the Bible, which is the Septuagint, which is the, you know, Dead Sea Scrolls, which is all of these things, which is all culminated, let's say now, in the Moorish Circle 7 Quran. Those are the things or the maxims of law that you would use to quote based upon your position as being a part of a different nation altogether, more so than quoting things that have already been written by this so-called nation that you are not saying that you're a part of. But when you deal with them in a strictly commercial fashion, then what you do is tie yourself up with them with paperwork. Whereas you go to them through a strictly international fashion, it becomes something altogether different, in which now the monies and stuff like that is now being put into a more international or national character as dedicated to the preservation of a certain lifestyle that is in the danger of being forgotten. Same way they create the World Wildlife Foundation and all of that to create all of these national preserves to not let humans on. You know what I'm saying? We're at the stage where they're trying to re-terraform everything and turn it back into some sort of pseudo-Eden of destructed cities grown over with vegetation. You know what I'm saying? While, they live underground or in space or whatever the hell fake future they've created that they want to create in movies to get us to believe, so that way it gives them the organic energy to be able to make something happen, whether we realize it or not. Because every cell phone that they've made since 2000 has some sort of organic receiver in it due to the carbonated melanin that they've taken out of the rubber to make the damn phone. Which is why some of the new ones, I just realized myself, can get wet and still work. Because the blackness in it is absorbing the water the same way your skin would. So now we're talking about bioluminescent or biotechnology that is synthesized through human touch. Understand? So all of this new age stuff and all that is great. Yet the more technologically advanced a society is, the more spiritually bankrupt it is. Yet the less technologically advanced society is, the more spiritual it is. So we have to decide what's the segue, what society we really want to be a part of, and whether or not, or what aspects of the old ways that we're going to deal with as we move into what we perceive as the future. And then we have to create vehicles and imagery and things like that that have us in futuristic or past situations of grandeur. Same way they'll make a gladiator or something. Of course, when we're in it, there's only one black guy, and he's a slave in Africa. This is what I'm saying with how they do it, and because it's all Caucasian people, they believe that they've always run everything. It's okay. But the minute you have one black character in a movie where they think it should be white, then it's all this racism stuff that comes out of it. Because there's a deep angst in both cultures that has not been remedied, and that I don't really think can be remedied at this point. It can only really be exposed, and then, whatever happened. However, you and I don't have to be a part of all of that, because we know better. We know where's the origin of all that stuff. So there has to be a different society, something else for us to deal with, because we have risen above the situation of becoming so emotionally involved that we want to go out and then hurt somebody who happens to be of a different nationality or color. So whoever would have problems with me, it would have to be because of something I've said in a situation like this. But whatever I've said, I have never or will never urge violence against somebody, regardless of who or what. Because that would then put me in a karmic position and would abuse the position that I have been blessed to be in. So I can't even go to that. All I can do, again, is expose and say what it is. And some people like that and some people don't. Some people want to look at me as the problem because I'm saying what it is instead of dealing with what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? That's like hating the doctor for the diagnosis and not the illness for what's going on. But you can't hate an illness. You can't hate cancer. You can hate it like I hate that I have it, but essentially it doesn't care. So that's all you. And for all you know, that feeds it. Because it's probably a malification of something that has accumulated over time by living in such a society. Don't let them tell you that they was suffering from cancer and melanoma and stuff in Kemet and in Africa. Don't believe all of that, man. Because, again, that's trying to tie you to a history and a reality that's not yours genetically. That wasn't your situation. And they use the term equality as a vehicle to make everybody want to believe that they mean the same when they say that, when really they mean everybody be equal in the same pit. Not everybody be equal together. And whoever get out the pit get raised up and we suckle at our bosom and now lives by the grace of us. And in that, they forget about the people they was in the pit with. And so to justify and whatever, they create little, things like, the charities and all this type of stuff. That helps some people. And that's great. But if they were to actually unify their money in something outside of a strip club or liquor or sneakers or something like that, and actually put their money into, okay, we're going to create an institution, a museum of hip-hop that's run and owned and operated by only, like, the youth in hip-hop, they would get shut down quicker than they would have for trying to start a label or a distribution company together. Because once you sign with them people, you sign with them. It's the mob. It's the pink mafia, the Jew mafia, the gay mafia, the the Russian mafia, the intelligence mafia. Everybody's the mob. And you know it's like that because they made all of the mob movies in the late 90s and then used hip-hop to market them to the world. So whenever they make movies about certain people, you know that people or whatever's already been taken care of. You know what I'm saying? It's a marker. So, again, nationhood, natural law, natural equity, all has to be backed from a Netta perspective, and that Netta perspective is from an earlier perspective, yet with a broader visual futuristic outlook that can only be presented in a unified fashion of people who may not follow the same necessarily ideological sense, but because all of the ideologies deal with black consciousness, that's what they all agree on. And that is backed up by, again, a treaty that has been recognized by everybody, and then everybody can do their thing. And then when anything happens, this way it makes it easier for the government. It makes it easier for them. Because now they have somebody they could directly call, the office or whatever they could directly go to or whatever. And that be that. And you don't even have to make it big. You don't have to make it open like that. Like it's whack that the only form that we even have to build on it like this or to propose it is something like this. Yet at the same time, again, this is not even really a formal proposal. This is just a what if we did something like that. Because everything in its potential state is actual. So the potential of the reality is more real than the reality sometimes itself. So again, if you file paperwork and you don't have a well-treated piece of friendship or something akin to that, then you are still always going to be caught up in the statehood bureaucracy of whatever they're functioning from. And because you may not necessarily have, like if you're part of Mars Science Temple, you can't really file paperwork and stuff like that. Because the government now has created, back when we was doing it, they first initiated what they call the Paper Terrorist Act, in which, because they was getting hit with real paperwork, they were claiming that they were under siege. And so they needed ability to reduce the amount of paper due to how much they were getting in volume. So what that translates to is they was getting hit by too many liens, and they didn't have enough people who knew what was going on to really know how to flip it. So they were asking the judge for a motion or action to make it a criminal act if you send a certain amount of paperwork. You know what I'm saying? So you couldn't send them like more than like 2 or 3 documents. Like first it started with like 10, and it was like, you know what I'm saying, 5, and then it was like 3. So then we had to get smart and then microsize a lot of the documents to fit like 3 or 4 on a page, you know, stuff like that, because that would allow, once upon receipt, they would have to deal with it. So nowadays they have created a situation where they're trying to make it look like these malls are using what they refer to as frivolous lien, and that the frivolous lien they're proposing what they call the Frivolous Lien Act. And they're trying to say that the paperwork is too much or silly. But silly and frivolous, too much, these terms equate to, how do you say, they equate to, like silly means rich, like frivolous means too high, according to Beauvais, as well as some of the old Strathmore books they put out, the old ones. But regards to the fact, these are the elements that have been placed in the way now of what we would perceive as nationhood. So this is all being done to also give them an impetus to be able to figure out what they want to do with the Palestinian situation, because they want the Palestinian situation to be a model of the new situation they want in Africa, where they have dual countries, where each country is split in two or three. Like Iraq used to be Basra, Mosul, and Fallujah, I think. And then they kind of like got it all together. So after Lawrence of Arabia. So nowadays, this is what they want to do. So if you are doing things on an individual basis, again, you can get picked off, hypothetically, just due now to the new character of them trying to do that. And, of course, your boy was the one who said it's okay for them to do this in this trip to Afghanistan. Because what that's basically, like I said, going to do is basically going to try to flip this whole, we're going to get the troops out shit. And everybody, is going to get happy, especially around the time of the election. This is what we need, or he needs to go into the next phase of this transitional period. So, the overall evidence of any of this turning out in a beneficial manner is now being tested out in experiment laboratories like these schools where the shootings are going on, so they can occupy or create a, again, model of the society that they have mapped out in movies like The Hunger Games, where a society based upon Luciferianism and depopulation is the model of everything. And each society is segmented and fully focused on one occupation, which again is the basic byproduct of reptilian society itself. So it's anybody's game, really. You know what I mean? Because not everybody's down with it. So socially speaking, this new frivolous act that they want to try to flip will have certain criminal penalties. I don't think they can really throw anyone in jail. Well, they always find a way to throw you in jail. I don't think they can really throw anybody in jail yet, so long as everybody is, especially if you're functioning from a indigenous character, like claiming or trying to reclaim shit. Because really that's what you should be using, or we all should be using it for. But see, if we were doing it as a nation or a national ministry trust, then it would be more effective. Understand? Because it would then have to be recognized. Like, the government is not going to give you $1.2 trillion. They don't give a damn how good your paperwork is. They don't give a damn how long you've been doing it. They're just not going to dole out $1.2 trillion to one individual. You have better chances of winning the lotto, than doing that, than them actually saying, okay, boom, because if that's the case, they would have been doing it. Like I said, they could just easily create that account with Geithner, and then they have the chargeback set up routinely, where all you got to do is file your shit at the end of whatever month, or whatever they do it, or whatever, and get your card renewed for another year or another 10 years or whatever it is. If it's unlimited credit, then it shouldn't matter, right? Buff Simmons got a black card, right? So, it really should be no issue. But it is an issue because the people that you asking to get this money from is the same people that's been hiding it from you for the past 228 years. So why would they give it to you now? especially just you. You know what I mean? So again, this is not to rain on anyone's parade. This is not to say whoever is whack or saying this or this is not about any of that. This is about real talk, man. Practicality, keeping it real, which is what we all say we about. So it's not about how much I know or how much or whatever. I'm talking about a deep analyzation of something that's been going on for a while that for some reason no one is really talking about. You know what I mean? First thing nations want to know is why. Why are you not unified? Why? How can you not be unified based on all this other shit? What's going on in y'all? That's a good question. How can we not? Because some of us is trying to get paid. Some of us is trying to, stay alive. You know what I'm saying? And then some of us are trying to do both, which is how it has been since 1791. It started to decay and had its beginning, that actually became physical by 1791, but had its beginning in 1492. But actually was set off in 8,419 BC, during the time of the beginning of the whole Yakub thing. If you even equate that as an actual aspect of black history. You know what I'm saying? But white people know it. And I ain't heard a white man yet who just told me that it ain't true. You know what I'm saying? White people quicker to ask me about this shit than black folk. Black folk quicker to tell you that shit is not true. The people, movies, look at Underworld, man. Look at the Underworld trilogy. And that was written by a black man. That was written by the black man who played the wolf in the. So, you can be so-called black, or you could be black for some people, you know what I mean? So, but too black for me may not be too black for you. Some people may not see somebody, with, gaps and all of that, or screaming at people or whatever, or berating people with their intelligence or whatever it is. Some people may not see that as disrespectful or whack or whatever. Some people may see that, that's how that person is. So then after that, you got to look at what that person has contributed and what has come from all of that. Okay, now that we know that we're the Olmecs and all of that, can we go down there as a delegation and actually make a connection or get a treaty with the Mexican government that says that we're this and that? If you do that as a 14th Amendment citizen, you go to jail for treason. You can't do that. But if you have a treaty that has already been established in their government that says that you're not a part of it, the same way a Seminole or whoever has a treaty with the whatever government they want or whatever, nobody's talking to them. And they hate those guys. They hate the so-called Native Americans. Next we will talk about ARM, which was a Black Panther-style organization that was dedicated to the liberation of Native American peoples. And they followed the blueprint of the Panthers to the point where the man came at them the same way. And there's still political prisoners attached to that, like Running Bear. And there was a brother named Red River taken out or all of that. But again, these people have treaties. They had treaties based upon what they could do. But the reason why I could talk about it like this is because the man knows he got the fixing already. See what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is taken to heart by some people, but you know what I'm saying, by most people, you already know. He already got it locked deep. You know what I'm saying? So again, I'm just keeping it real as we do here at Super Heru Radio to also encourage you to know that there is options, and that's what we're talking about. aside from all of the political intrigue and espionage and satanic ritual and all of that, we're also talking about an option, a way to establish something that's already been laid out for you to have, that you have tools to implement you, to protect you in it, that have nothing to do with the United States government, that the United States government is bound to respect due to the fact that you have already established it. But the fact is we have never had any enforcement capability because we haven't actually enforced anything based upon a treaty position with each other. We are nations. Within you and I, within that black woman, is over 1 billion eggs, man. Yeah. Number 312. You want Super Heru Radio?
Hello?
312? Yeah. You want Super Heru Radio?
Oh, yeah.
Brother?
Oh, what's going on, man? This is Malchus.
How you doing, man? Hey, brother. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Just listening. I didn't even know that I was in the queue. I was just listening to everything and just on it. This is my first time logging in and looking at the chat room and stuff. So most of the time I'm just on the go listening to the show and everything. But I think that you're all doing an excellent job. And
thank you, Sammy.
I just really appreciate all the information. I'm just taking in a lot.
Thank you, man. Yeah. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, well, I'll just continue listening. Though, if I do have a question or something, I guess I can hit number 1, huh?
Yes, sir.
All right, I appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. Peace. 301 on Super Heru Radio.
Peace, Aseer. How you doing?
Peace, Queen. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you? How's the family?
Wow.
Peace to you and Selena.
Thank you.
Little Amor. I've been good. I'm good. I got 2 things, right? One, I wanted to know if you got what I had sent you.
Yes, sir.
Oh, that's what's up. That's what's up.
Yes,
that
sir.
makes me feel
It's
good.
dope,
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. My second thing is I've been really a big fan of the comic book thing since I started watching your lectures on DVD. And I just wanted to know, like, pretty much everything that you said was going to happen happened. So since the Avengers is coming out, what is your take on that? And how does that affect the comic book world and the movie world and, you know, everything else with us or whatever?
That's an incredible question because that's relevant to where we are right now, you know. Well, the Avengers is interesting because the Avengers is really about time manipulation and time control. When you read, like, the comics, you could get into the back stuff, but to cut to the chase, there's a series they call Avengers Forever. And if you read this book, it's about this guy named Kang, who is really Iron Man gone mad in the future, right? And he tries to manipulate everything through the Avengers, through different time periods and alternate time realities and stuff. So essentially, it's a allegory of how they use archetypes to represent different eras. So Captain America will represent the early 1930s to 40s, World War II. You know what I'm saying? Whereas the Hulk will represent the atom era or the nuclear era, you know, after they dropped the Manhattan Project and all of that. That's why if you look at the picture of Oppenheimer and the picture of David Banner in the initial drawing, they look the same because they was patterned after him. And the Hulk then represents Osiris, right, which then represents the element of carbon-14, which then will represent the aspect of somebody dying and then decaying and then the essence of them going back into the earth and then going up into the atmosphere and then coming back down in the form of rain and air and all of that. So then you got the Black Widow, which then represents the Cold War. You know what I'm saying? The 50s and 60s with the ascension, with the creation of the aspect of the CIA from a thing called the OSS to the assassination of Kennedy, which becomes a time marker in history, in everybody's memory, the same way 9/11 is. So that's
right.
a period in which I didn't exist. But when I hear about it and see about it, I can emotionally be brought to a time in which it did. But in that time, I was in an inferior position politically, right, than I am now.
Mm-hmm.
You see? But at that time, I was more spiritually and more ready to do shit, maybe, than I am in this one, right? Then Hawkeye would represent, like, the old Errol Flynn, you know, Rhett Butler type of Hollywood, old Hollywood. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And then you've got Nick Fury now, who is really a white character in the comic book, but then they did this thing where they killed him and then brought him back, but then it's like made him disappear. But now for some reason he's got this black son now, right, who is now this bald-headed guy that we call Nick Fury, who's really Sam Jackson,
right.
who then represents the whole Shaft, the evolution of the blaxploitation Shaft era. At one point, we was watching TV shows growing up where the black guy was always like the shiftless guy or whatever, right? And the white guy was always like telling him to shape up. Then it got to a point where it went from every cop movie, the black character or the black sergeant was always like the yelling black man, right? And the white guy was the one he was getting into. That happened after the movie Officer and a Gentleman, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where Louis Gossett Jr. was breaking him down right after he did Enemy Mine, right? With Dennis Quaid, where he played the black reptilian, you know what I'm saying, flipping on the white man. So, again, this Avengers thing now becomes a cross-marketing licensing extravaganza now that Disney's connected to because Disney bought Marvel. So in this now, all of this money now is starting to funnel. But remember, Stan Lee was involved with the Whitewater shit with Bill Clinton and them when they gave him money to start his comic book company and then used that as a laundry to launder the money that they was coming in from the SNL scandals with Michael Milken and these niggas. Michael Milken was the same nigga who flipped on Larry Flint. And you know what I'm saying? Who tried to prosecute Larry Flint for pornography.
Right.
Meanwhile, he's really the butt buddy of Reagan. Excuse me, Carter. You know what I'm saying? Through Skull and Bone. So this is what I'm saying is all a loop and how they got it. So now this Avengers thing now has now propelled each archetype, which again, each character now represents each era of socialization.
So why can't they just keep it all comic book instead of bringing all the comic books into the movies? Like, what is the purpose of that?
Because the comic book is the only place that mythos still exists. The mythos of humanity doesn't exist in any other art form. The mythos of humanity doesn't exist in classical art unless it's Orientalist art or like expressionist of like nature. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
The spirit of the whole act of hero and villain is strictly relatable to the mythos of comics. It's not really in the aspect of the other stuff because the other stuff is more, the other stuff is more almost grown up. It doesn't have the imagination. It can, like in Star Wars, but even that is still based on good and evil, black and white, extremes, light and dark, Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker. But then again, in the comics, in the movie, Luke Skywalker wins, but then in the comics, Luke Skywalker becomes Darth Vader. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's great in the mythic aspect, but if you take your children there as original children, as original people, you should first show them, before you get there, the black versions of them. So like the black version of the Hulk would be Osiris. The black version of Black Widow would be like Nephthys or Kali. Well, actually Kali. The black version of Captain America would be somebody like Ogun. The black version of what's the other one? Hawkeye would be Sagittarius. You know what I'm saying? Or Sagittarius. The other one is who else? Captain America. Nick Fury would be like Ptah.
So
you know
would you say that Watchmen kind of opened the doors for the Avengers?
Nah.
No.
Yeah, this one is going to be the portal for all the ones they do after that, because now DC got to do one. They got Batman, but that's still just one guy. They got to come out with Justice League now to make it even to up the ante, so that way when they're coming out with X-Men and all that people are already used to that. DC hasn't really punched that market.
I have a feeling they might put out the Civil War, because I was reading the comic book the other day, and I was like, wow, wouldn't that be something if they made that into a movie?
That would be dope. But
that would be dope.
But then they would have to have, to have a movie like that to just come out with no, how they did Avengers, why they went with the money, is because they did the pre-work, you know what I'm saying? Like they laid the groundwork through Iron Man and Hulk. And
right. Is that why they had put out all those separate movies first, so they could bring the Avengers, so they could all come in as a whole?
Right.
Okay.
Because remember, they can't just thrust a new world on you. They got to give you little bits of it first to get you to accept it and be like, okay, this is good, dope. And then boom, here it is, it's dope. So that's how they marketed the Hunger Games, which is the opening now for the Avengers. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Which now leads to the Dark Knight. You see what I'm saying? Batman dies and shit. Spoiler alert, sorry. But he allegedly gets it because he don't want to play the character no more. So that may be good for the character, but they may not be good for him, because
Well, did they need to do Men in Black 3? Was there a purpose of it? Because I feel like they didn't have to.
No.
And then they're going back to 1969. So what is the...
Right. Because I told you, remember, in a couple of shows back, I was saying how they always want to time control you and put you back in the 50s. They always want to put you in a position where you was in an inferior position where they could call you nigga outright and not be no thing. You know what I'm saying? They
I know,
put you in a
but
time
it's funny with the numbers, though. They always go back to the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s.
Because that was the height of their civilization.
So they feel like they always have to go back there to talk about it.
Their civilization started really in 1888 and started to decline by 1945. So the height of their empire was the early 1900s. You know what I'm saying? That was the roaring 20s. That's when they were really winning, plundering the graves, rewriting the histories, all of that crazy stuff. All of the bootlegging, all of the white slavery, all of that was going wild because all of the Republican banks that was owned by the old Moors that were now redesignated as Negroes could not be owned by Negroes. They could only be owned by the governor who was the steward of it. Because remember, Jesse James and the rest of these people were all Freemasons who were put out there as quote-unquote outlaws to destroy the old Republican banks that were established in the so-called Midwest by those Moorish families who had traveled from the empires of Khalifa, which is now California, or quote-unquote Anasazi, these people. These people eventually left those places and settled in what is now Illinois and the South Midwest or whatever. But eventually they were ran out, see what I'm saying, by the quote-unquote civilized Europeans who came to become land renters from the Jewish so-called landowners, land administrators who were working for this corporatized federal government that since 1812 had been under the jurisdiction of the Lloyd's Bank of London and Barclays and them in Europe. You see what I'm saying? So all that money that was coming over here that was put in them Confederate banks was actually money that was laundered from the British East India Company during the Opium Wars, which they exposed in the movie National Secret 2. When they was trying to find a desk and all of that,
Right.
Yeah, all of that. They have the secret book of the president and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a whole mythos and all of that tied into the old establishment of how the empire was. But because we don't have any written record or people don't really talk about it or try to find it, we don't put it into a context that we don't even think. Like we get this knowledge and we don't even think, yo, I could put this into a comic book or I could put this into whatever. People may get it more than if I just put it in a reference book or straight up text. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
We look at it the long way because there's a sense still in us that we got to prove who and what we are. When all we got to do is just put it out there, and then when the money come in from it, put it into something productive. But to do that, you got to keep the integrity of what it is you're putting out.
Yeah.
And then not a lot of us do that. So,
sure.
You know, but it's definitely probably a good movie. I haven't seen it yet, but it's probably dope. I mean, I feel like I've been waiting to see this movie since I was, you know.
I just thought it was funny because, you know, it's dropping, and I was like, yeah, I know Aseer's going to go in on this one, boy. I know.
Yeah, it would be great, you know, to see it and to be like, wow, okay, this is really wild. Because I remember at 5 talking to my friends about that, 6 and 7 and talking about that, you know, with the comics. Because, again, it's the only place where the mythos and children can connect. Because there's something about the pictures in the boxes and how the mind conjoins them with the imagery and the word bubble, because the word bubble, again, represents the so-called oversoul, which is the real you, which is the one having the actual experience. So the actual image that we're seeing in the panel is really an illusionary aspect, not only of the artist, but of the writer. So we're seeing something that's not even really there, you know what I mean? But
right.
It's there in that Primacolor, 4-color process. For some reason, if the art is dope and the story's cool, it's like you can just keep reading it. Because it's something, again, it's what is, that's why all of the guys all the people doing these comics is like 30 to 50-year-old white men. You know what I'm saying? Blooded old white dudes, you know? Yeah. And, you know, we had Dwayne McDuffie, bless the dead, but, you know how they do. You know how they do. And, again, we don't have nothing in our community to even really investigate that ourselves. Like, imagine if we had the National Ministry be able to fully investigate this thing totally, where we could just pay to find out who killed Tupac, who killed this person, no matter how much it costs, how long, no matter how long it takes to pay for this thing annually. Imagine to be able to have something to do that. They do that every day. That's what the Smithsonian is. They found so much black stuff that they like, yo, we can't, we don't even have no place to hide this. Said, yo, let's dump it in the ocean. They dumped that shit in the Pacific Ocean, man. The Atlantic Ocean. People are crazy. So, I wrote a story with a character, you know what I'm saying, called Moses Bones, who's like Indiana Jones, but he fights, you know, the Smithsonian.
Wow.
You know?
That's cool.
But again, you know, things like that are things that we don't think that are, in a sense, revolutionary, but they're revolutionary in the action because we're doing something that can, again, is going to affect the people who matter, children, because that's what they're targeting. All music is targeted to children. They don't care if we listen to that shit or not. No.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I'm not going to hold you because I know somebody else probably want to talk, but I just wanted to touch base with you on that and get your input. So, yeah, expect something else from me soon.
Indeed, I will look out. And thank you.
Yeah, and when you drop your comic book, let me know because I would love a copy of that.
I will. I'm going to send you later.
No problem.
I'll have to make the email as well.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Peace to you, Selena, Little Amor, and the rest of the family.
I will. She says peace. It's all good. Yeah, man. That's what it's about. Yeah, we could do that. A minute. So, yeah, to surmise where we're at, or what we've been building on, essentially, for the people who just came in again, is one of the hidden aspects of recognition or of the acquisition of international character is treaty. And unfortunately, whether we understand it or not, these people follow the treaties based upon the laws of the maxims of the law of nations. So if you don't know what the law of nations is, you might want to read it over, give it a once over, peep it. But essentially, it is different from what your national charter comes from, which is, again, the family of nations, which predates modern history. So you should look into that as well. And once that becomes the foundation of the law that was done, you will understand that if God created man and then man created government, then government can never rule over man, because government can never be God. But government can manifest God as Gumar Az-Dubar, which is peace, or government ordinance defense, which then subscribes to the maxims of whatever system exists within the allotment of time that society has to function in. So at the beginning of this society, the ending of that society was already written, you understand? So we are now the culmination of that ending and seizing, or what they would say in Latin, the carpe diem, the seizing of the day of that so-called empire, based upon the lessons learned from living the opposite end of how things were prior to that. Because prior to the collapse of everything, you was on top. Don't let them tell you wasn't. Don't let them tell you that you was a slave and all this other stuff. There was way less slaves than they telling you. And when we say slaves, I'm not talking about you as a black person. That term cannot be applied to you, because that term was specifically applied to those of Slovenia and those who were taken in bondage as quote-unquote Christian or Circassian slaves. And that was, unfortunately or fortunately, your ancestors doing that to their ancestors. So if we're really talking reparations, then technically we would be giving it to them. This is how twisted they got the game. You know what I mean? The slave got you thinking that they always own the house. You know what I'm saying? And you looking at him like, man, well, maybe he's right, because you don't have evidence of the ownership or title of the house. And there's nobody that you can really go or vouch for you, because they're going through the same thing in their situation. And because they didn't have a treaty or something that was set aside for them, aside from the actual declaration of who or what they represented. Who or what you represent is cool, but who or what do you represent, and what are you doing that for in the world? That's what these things are for, because unfortunately we don't live in a world of all mentally and spiritually capable people. We live in the opposite of that. Yet the natural world is whatever is natural in that world that you are visiting or inhabiting. So in any world that you inhabit as a spiritual being, you are the original being. You understand what I'm saying? It's not like you're just the original man because you're here in America at this time. Whatever the original state of whatever entity, higher state, alternate reality, parallel universe that you manifest or come into through, you are still the original people of that. You understand what I'm saying? So you have something that exists beyond all of this. So if we want to manifest something that can achieve that, then boom, we can do that. It just takes, Selena said, it just takes a hell of a time in this reality, which it does, because anything worth doing right, you got to unfortunately do yourself. You can't leave it up to nobody. You can't delegate the responsibility of the nation to, the law officers of Bernstein, Bloomstein, and Rothheim. You can't do that. You got to do the work. You got to get it to the point that by the time these people is calling you, asking to just do your bidding, whatever you want, they'll just do. And that's what they are there to do, because that's what they do. We are the real issue, too, is that we're the only race or group or people. We don't pay off the police or none of these people like that. I've said it before, I'll say it again. We don't do that. So, of course, we're victimized the most because we're not on the payroll. Rich spiritually is dope on one end, but on the other end, it's hard because We don't have anything that backs us up, and that's the issue. These people got a neighborhood watch where they showing you with a neighborhood watch, and nigga was not even a cop. He could just kill you if he a neighborhood watchman now. So if he could get away with that, you understand? That means anybody, anything, whatever. You black, I felt threatened, I killed him. That's it. You understand? That's not your society. That's not the society you're supposed to live in. I don't give a damn how rich you are. I don't give a damn how much money you got. The Henry Gates situation showed you. It's what it is. Niggas is puppets. These dudes don't run nothing. You understand? They don't run nothing. They're about to sacrifice Holder to keep Geithner. This is how sick these people are. They're about to sacrifice Holder, who was flipping the guns for them, flipping the drugs for them, flipping the stolen cars for them, all at once, flipping it. You know what I'm saying? For them. The way that he was doing it when he was rolling with Clinton. The way he was doing it when him and Clinton was rolling with, what's his name? There's a picture of Bill Clinton when he's 16 shaking Kennedy's hand. Did you know that Kennedy was a paper boy for the Nazis in Germany during the rise of the Hitler Reich? No, you didn't know that. Like, these are the things about history, again, that really paint the picture of how things are. But see, the people don't want to get things how they are. They want things to be how they want them to be. You know what I mean? But we can't live like that no more. It don't exist. That world don't exist no more. What only exists is what is. And what is you can file and do what you want to do individually, and that's great. And if you have success from that, that's awesome. But it is more likely, in a sense, for them to not look at us as a national body politic, because we do not have a ministry to do things like that for or through. Essentially, governments use the United States government corporation as a brokerage house or a clearing house. So in Wall Street, they got everybody in the world's money. So essentially, the country is basically one big bank for them. You understand what I'm saying? It's not really a country the way you would even think about it from a strawman, whatever perspective. You got to think from a more bird's eye view perspective of it. You're looking more at an octopus more than you're looking at an eagle. You know what I'm saying? Or skull and bones. You're looking at something that is multilateral, that is multi-level, and that is feeding on itself at the same time as feeding on everyone else. So essentially, we're talking about a unified faction of disbelievers in God or creation. And again, I'm using the term God loosely. You can substitute it for whatever name you use for it. And in the process of that, it has created a dullard situation in our capacity where we're seeing the forest for the trees. We're seeing ourselves as nobles and sheiks in these things, but we are not creating grand situations to be recognized as such. The reason why they have to deal with the Indians, because the Indians never stopped doing the powwows that was taught to them by the remnants of us that survived Wounded Knee. So remember, they killed everybody who knew the ghost dance. So the people who was born after that are the descendants of those native people who was, quote unquote, coming up and amalgamated that they had already saved, because they killed all the black people. Same way the Detroit mayor put out an edict that he would kill all of the black animals in that was owned by the black homesteaders in Detroit. Same way that they were doing that. So again, if you are doing it and you don't have a group of people who are doing it the same way that you can fully subscribe to and who can vouch for you and so forth and so on, that you can put your money up with, and that they can have their own family trust and add to a basic ministry trust that can be recognized and filed internationally, you then have greater power to do things in the name of what that nation or whoever is. Because whatever you're reclaiming in the name of that nation and not just you. However, to do so, we have to rectify certain instances, such as the flag situation, such as the individual power situation, such as the acceptance of all of the so-called black consciousness as the focus of the whole thing as opposed to individual black consciousness. But these things can only be attained, really, in my view, if the people begin to first apply these things to themselves. And that's the rub, as Shakespeare says. So for those people who are interested, like I said, we're building on our class this Wednesday on treaties of peace and friendship, the origin of such, and how to structure one for your own benefit. You know what I'm saying? That encompasses the entire situation that we've all been through. Because that's really what it really is, the meat of it. It really is the story, the ancestral story of how you got to this situation in legal form. And that is the narrative that all the thing that you file after that everybody else that signs on to it, subscribe to, that becomes things that eventually wind up like constitutions and bills of rights and things like that. Because that's how it started, or we taught them to do it. So if we could do it for them and look what they got, why can't we do it for ourselves? Why can't we remember how to do it for ourselves? Do we want to do it for ourselves? See what I'm saying? I'm at least real enough to say that. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to give you a false picture of what's going on. This is a dire situation. Yet at the same time, as I said at the beginning of the show, nothing is what it is always going to be. So the darkest time is before the dawn. So whatever the situation may be at this particular juncture, it doesn't mean that it's always going to be that. But the only way it's going to change is if we do it. So absolution and extremity is the enemy in this situation. The time for compassion and forgiveness comes in the understanding of the psychological debt that we have both inflicted on each other. Men and women, West Indians, Black Americans, Black Africans, skin bleachers, permas, everybody, man. So again, like I said, we're building on actual protocols to make that is the treaty of peace and friendship. That is a jewel within the concept of international understanding when dealing with material or what we refer to as current affairs, and something we could build on. So if you want to join the class, holler at me at houseofl@hotmail.com. That's HOUSEOFEL. And you can hit me with that. And then, too, you can check out www.com. We have www.blackmambaworkouts.com, MOMBA workouts.com, and www.southoutside.com. Please check those out. And thank you again for the continued support. The people have sent donations. Selena loves everybody. And we wish you and your families joy and happiness. And this is definitely a time in which we can form bonds that is not esoteric but are exoteric. You know what I'm saying? Things that are outside of the realm of ritual and obligation. You know what I'm saying? So these are the times that we can make this happen. So, you know what I mean? We want to say peace to all the human families on the planet Earth. I hope you got some good information tonight in terms of all the dialectics and things you can do the knowledge to. And we say peace.